Breaking news out of Las Vegas. The Raiders have just shaken up their roster in a way nobody saw coming. Two major moves in just the past couple of days, and the ripple effects could change how this team looks heading into the season. Stay with us, because what I'm about to tell you is something every Raiders fan needs to hear. The Raiders have officially moved on from Thomas Harper, a player many believe could hold down the slot corner role this year. Harper logged plenty of snaps last season, but with this release, it's crystal clear. Las Vegas has no intention of sticking with the traditional nickel package. His replacement? A very intriguing choice, and we'll get into that shortly. But that's not the only big shift. On the offensive line, things just got even more dramatic. Backup tackle Charles Garand has shown he's not quite ready to start. And to make matters worse, Thayer Munford, who's been the Raiders' swing tackle the past couple of years, struggled heavily this preseason. The Raiders have now decided to cut ties with Munford entirely. And instead, they've brought in a fresh face, Stone Forsythe. The 6 feet 8 inches, 315-pound tackle comes over after spending 4 seasons with the Seattle Seahawks. Drafted back in 2021, Forsythe was always seen as a developmental piece behind Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. While his time in Seattle had its ups and downs, the Raiders believe he could be a more reliable option than Munford. Before we dive deeper into what this move really means for the Raiders, back-end index pointing right, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss the latest NFL breaking news. Let's move on to the new updates. Now here's the question on everyone's mind. Is Stone Forsythe really an upgrade? Honestly, I believe he is. Munford just wasn't getting the job done. And while Forsythe isn't a Pro Bowler by any means, he brings more size, experience, and at least some upside. Not every fan agrees. But given where the Raiders' offensive line currently stands, this feels like the smarter gamble. Stone Forsythe's name has been buzzing across social media, and not in the best way. A TikTok clip, later reposted on Twitter, went viral among Raider Nation. Thousands of fans chiming in, many saying Forsythe was flat-out terrible. Now, let's be clear. That video focused heavily on Forsythe's rough stretch in 2024, when he was forced into action for the Seahawks after Abraham Lucas missed the first 6 to 7 weeks with a knee injury. The numbers from that span? Brutal. Forsythe surrendered 35 pressures in just 6 games. On paper, that looks like a disaster. But here's what that viral video didn't mention. Forsythe was injured midway through that stretch. In fact, almost all of those pressures, 27 of the 35, came in just 3 games when he was clearly banged up. Against Detroit alone, he allowed 12 pressures. 2 weeks later versus San Francisco, he gave up 10 more. Those games tell the story of an injured player, not necessarily an incapable one. Now, let's be real. Forsythe isn't a star, and no one's pretending he is. He's a swing tackle, a backup lineman who can step in when needed. If the Raiders rely on him full-time, they'll need chips, double teams, and plenty of help. But to say he's worse than Thayer Munford? That's not accurate. Watch his 2025 preseason tape. He looks steadier, more balanced, and sharper than what Raider Nation saw in those viral clips. And don't forget the context. The Seahawks were in turmoil last year, with a brand new coaching staff reshaping the offense. Even Geno Smith, usually a deadly deep ball passer, threw more interceptions in 2024 than any year prior. Scheme and coaching absolutely matter, and Forsythe was caught in the middle of that transition. So the real question isn't whether Forsythe is perfect, because he isn't. The question is whether he's good enough to be an upgrade in Las Vegas. When you look back at Stone Forsythe's 2024 season, yes, he struggled. But the Seahawks' offensive system wasn't exactly built to help him succeed. The new play caller shifted the focus toward inside passing concepts, forcing Geno Smith to work more in the middle of the field, an area that didn't highlight his natural strengths. The ripple effect? The offensive line, including Forsythe, was often left exposed. Fast forward to 2025 preseason, and the difference is noticeable. Forsythe looks more confident, more polished, and more controlled in his movements. That's impressive when you consider his size. At 6'8", most tackles his height move like they're stuck in mud. Look at Thayer Munford, also a tall tackle, but painfully slow in space. Trent Brown is another example. Massive, but not quick. Forsythe, on the other hand, has surprising mobility for his frame, and that's what gives him a real chance to stick in this league. Now, let's be honest. He's not a franchise left tackle. Nobody's saying he's the next cornerstone of the Raiders' offensive line. But compared to Munford, there's no debate. Munford was one of the weakest tackles in football last season, and upgrading from that level of play is already a step forward. Here's the key point. Quality backup offensive tackles are rare in the NFL. If a lineman is good enough, he's usually starting somewhere. Forsythe may not be a star, but he's a steady depth piece with upside, and those don't come around often. He could easily give the Raiders 4, 5, maybe even 7 more seasons of serviceable football. That's exactly the type of player a team needs when injuries strike, and it's why this signing matters more than fans might think. Here's why the Raiders might actually be in a better spot with Stone Forsythe as their swing tackle. Unlike Thayer Munford, who struggled heavily in nearly every opportunity, Forsythe brings one crucial advantage: versatility. He's lined up at both left and right tackle during his career. While his primary spot has been on the right side, he's shown enough flexibility to fill in wherever needed. That matters for a roster like Las Vegas. If Colton Miller were to miss time, rookie Charles Grant could step into the left side, the spot he's been preparing for all preseason. But if an issue comes up at right tackle with DJ Glaze, Forsythe could step in immediately without a major adjustment period. Having a swing tackle who can cover both ends of the line gives the Raiders insurance they didn't have with Munford. Now, let's keep expectations realistic. Forsythe isn't being asked to suddenly lock down a starting role. DJ Glaze has looked solid so far, and unless things go completely off the rails, Forsythe will remain in a backup role. But if disaster strikes, the Raiders won't be scrambling. They'll already have a season option waiting. One more detail that often gets overlooked: Forsythe spent time with the Giants this past offseason before being released. But being cut doesn't always mean a team has given up on you. Often, it's about roster numbers or fit, not talent. And remember, Raiders head coach Pete Carroll knows Forsythe well from their time together in Seattle. Carroll's familiarity with his game may have been a deciding factor in bringing him to Las Vegas. Think about it. Forsythe was blocked in New York by Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor, 2 established starters. In that situation, his path to meaningful snaps was slim. In Las Vegas, however, the opportunity is real. Andrew Thomas is one of the premier tackles in football, and with Jermaine Illuminor locking down the other side in New York, Stone Forsythe's chances of ever cracking the Giants lineup were slim. That's why his move to reunite with Pete Carroll makes sense. In Las Vegas, the right tackle spot isn't written in stone, and Forsythe sees a path to meaningful snaps that simply didn't exist with the Giants. But the Forsythe signing wasn't the only shakeup. The Raiders also parted ways with defensive back Thomas Harper. He didn't stay on the market long. The Detroit Lions claimed him off waivers almost immediately. Now, here's what's important. This wasn't the Raiders saying they didn't value Harper. More likely, they hoped to sneak him onto the practice squad. But once you waive a player, every team has a chance to scoop him up. The Lions moved quickly, and just like that, Harper was gone. It's an interesting loss because Harper played significant snaps in the preseason and even saw time in the slot during camp. But this move signals something bigger. The Raiders may not plan to use a traditional slot corner. Instead, expect to see heavy doses of the big nickel package. 3 safeties on the field nearly every time they're not in base defense. We've already seen rookie Q Blue Kelly taking reps inside, which suggests the coaching staff is more comfortable with that look. To replace Harper, Las Vegas brought in safety Tristan McCollum, most recently with the Texans and Eagles. And that raises a new question. Do the Raiders really need another safety? The roster is already crowded at the position, yet the front office clearly believes McCollum offers something Harper didn't. Whether it's versatility, athletic upside, or a better schematic fit, this was a conscious swap. And now, all eyes will be on how McCollum carves out a role in a secondary that suddenly looks much deeper at safety than at corner. The Thomas Harper situation really comes down to risk. Once you waive a player, there's always a chance another team claims him. And that's exactly what happened when Detroit stepped in. Still, it's clear the Raiders valued Tristan McCollum more. They signed McCollum first, then released Harper, showing where their priorities were. But here's the bigger question. Is McCollum really that much of an upgrade? Watching his tape, he's not a bad player. Solid athlete, good effort, but nothing that screams difference maker. Which leads to the concern. Is the Raiders' secondary in such rough shape that they're banking on wave players from other rosters? The move also raises eyebrows because Harper wasn't some fringe guy. He spent months with this new staff, took meaningful preseason reps in nickel looks, and knew the system inside and out. Then, the moment McCollum became available, Harper was out. That kind of decision makes you wonder how the coaching staff really views its defensive backs. And let's be honest, the secondary is still very much improving. Chris Smith will be expected to play heavy snaps, and Carl Edmonds could see time as well. Both are young, both are developing, and neither has locked down a long-term role. The defense has potential, but it's not hard to see the uncertainty creeping in. At the end of the day, the Raiders clearly believe McCollum offers something Harper didn't, whether that's versatility, familiarity with staff who worked in Philadelphia, or just raw athletic upside. But the gamble comes with risk, and the real test will be whether this secondary can hold its own when the season kicks off. Tristan McCollum is still a bit of a mystery, but he does check some of the boxes the Raiders clearly value. At 6 feet 3 inches and 200 pounds, he brings length and physicality to a secondary that's being reshaped under Pete Carroll's vision. This coaching staff wants eyes on the back end, whether it's at safety or corner, and McCollum fits that mold. The real challenge is evaluating what that means on the field. Safeties are notoriously difficult to judge on tape. Their assignments change constantly depending on the scheme. That's why a defense can look lost under one coordinator, then elite under another. We've seen it across the league, and the Raiders are hoping Carroll's system can bring out the best in players like McCollum. While Patrick Graham is still the defensive coordinator by title, make no mistake, this is Carroll's defense now. His fingerprints are all over the personnel choices, and his philosophy is steering the direction of this unit. That shift alone could be the biggest story of the season for Las Vegas. With kickoff just days away, the Raiders roster is far from perfect, but it's undeniably intriguing. A rebuilt offensive line, a secondary in transition, and a coaching staff putting its stamp on every move. Whether it all comes together or not, Raider Nation is in for a season full of storylines, and it's about to begin.